it's Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I have a fun card idea to share with you featuring the Simon Says Stamp plush dies. These dies are meant to be used with felt. However, I know some of you are either not interested in using felt or you're looking for ways to be able to stretch the use of these dies. So I want to show you the dies here before we get started on the card. We're going to be using these to create watercolored embellishments. I'm going to be die cutting each of these little pieces from some watercolor paper. You can see they have holes in the dies. This is meant so that way it would cut holes into your felt so it would be easier to stitch. It's going to make it easier for us to stitch these, however, with the watercolor paper. I've run them through my Big Shot machine. Now I'm going to pop out all the little set circles with my Tim Holtz craft pick. This is really great for popping all those little pieces out from your die. Here are all the pieces we're going to need. You've got your ice cream, the little frosting or like fudge sauce that goes up on top, and then you've got your cone, which will slip underneath, and our cherry, which of course you have to have on top of your ice cream. I really think these are really cute to be able to be used for cards, not only as felt pieces, because you can really get a lot of mileage out of dies like these. So let's get started and start creating with these. I'm going to be doing all of my coloring with my Zig Clean color markers. I'm starting off with the cherry and I'm applying a light coat of pink over top. I'm doing all of my watercoloring on Canson XL watercolor paper. Now the reason I chose this paper is because I wanted to have the texture that the Canson paper has over the Bristol Smooth paper that I a lot of times use with my zigs. I'm adding a darker red to the cherry to darken it up a bit, and then I'll come back to it in a little bit after it dries to add a little bit more shading. Moving on to the chocolate fudge, I'm going to apply a dark brown over the bottom portion of the icing. I want this to be very dark because chocolate fudge sauce is dark. So I'm going to work multiple layers into this chocolate fudge. I'm going to blend it out with my brush and some clean water, and I'll get that all blended out. Another way you could watercolor these pieces is by watercoloring swatches onto watercolor paper. So like say a swatch of brown, a swatch of pink, and other colors that you want your ice cream to be. And then die cut the paper swatches instead of coloring each individual piece. So it totally is up to you of how is best, easiest for you to be able to color these in. I'm going to add another layer of the brown, and then once that dries, I'm actually going to go back in and add a third layer. Moving on to the ice cream, I wanted this one to be vanilla, so I'm going to be using the flesh color that is in the Zig Clean color markers. I'm going to add that into the areas that I want the darkest, and then I'll blend that out with my water and my brush. And this is just going to give it a nice soft vanilla look. And I really think this becomes a really cute ice cream cone. Now also bear in mind that you can use any colors you want for your ice cream cone. You can make it look as realistic as you like or as fanciful as you like. I'm going to show you another version at the end of this video where I used different colors to make a more bright and festive looking ice cream cone. I'm going to be using this brown color for the ice cream cone. I think this color is a really nice color tone for the ice cream cone itself. This color looks a little bit more yellow as it first applies down, but once it dries, it has a little bit more of a browner tone. I'll go ahead and add in a little bit of beige to darken up the areas where I want them to be darkest. I want those areas around where the stitching holes are to have a little bit more extra shading, especially on this particular piece because ice cream cones are so textured. I'll blend that out with my water and brush, and now that we have everything colored, it's time to go ahead and add a little bit more extra detail. You can see here we've got our ice cream cone and our icing and our little cherry that will go on top. And we're going to be adding texture to these using water splatters. I love doing this to my watercoloring because I really think it adds a nice finishing touch to the color. I'm going to take my distress sprayer to help me do this. You could also use your hand or a paintbrush. I'm going to put all sorts of droplets all over these pieces. I'm pressing the nozzle kind of in little spurts. I'm not pushing it all the way, I'm like pushing it halfway so I get bigger droplets and smaller droplets at the same time. This has a little bit more of an organic feel rather than a fine mist. If you wanted it to be a fine mist, just go ahead and spritz it fully just like you would any other spray bottle. But because I wanted those bigger droplets, I just pushed the button halfway. I'll let that sit for a good little bit, probably about a minute, and then I took my rag and just dabbed it off with the rag, and I really love how it reveals that gorgeous texture. This is one of my favorite things about the Zig Clean color markers is that they react with water, just like Distress inks. So it kind of gives you a little bit more control like a marker. However, it gives you that same effect as the Distress inks. So here I'm bringing out my floss here. I love my floss box because it's organized by rainbow color. And of course that's really pretty. So I'm going to pull out some colors that I think would match up with the colors that I've chosen for my ice cream. I want the colors to be slightly similar, so that way the thread doesn't stand out too much. I'm going to use some pink to sew my cherry. I'm going to show you here how I do the sewing. I just do a simple back stitch. You could do any type of stitch that you want for these little dies. There are so many different stitching techniques that you could use to stitch these. Check online because I know you can find lots of different ways to be able to add some really fun details using your stitching if you wanted to do something a little bit more fancy than the back stitch. I want to show you here, I got to the end and this is how I finish off all of my stitching. Because I'm going to be gluing these together, I'm not worried about the floss being threaded into each other to hold it in place. I'm just tying it into a little overhand knot a couple times until I've got maybe like 2 or 3 knots, and then I'll go ahead and trim off the excess pieces. And that's going to hold the sewing in place. I'm not worried about it falling apart because again, we're going to be putting adhesive on the back of these pieces, so the thread is not going to end up being able to come apart. For the ice cream cone, I'm going to go ahead and start sewing all the way around. This is relatively simple stitching. However, I did want to show you when I got to the portions on the inside portion of the ice cream cones, I want to show you how I managed to keep the thread all in one piece without having to cut it and tie it into a knot and then start all over again. When I got to the end of an area that needed to turn, I just jumped down to the next closest hole that was below. So here you can see I worked on that row and now I'm going to jump down to the next one. And then after I finish this one, I'll jump down to that very bottom row. And once I was ready to go back up towards the top, I just threaded the floss up through the areas that I've already gone through. And that just saved me from having to cut floss and tie it up and put more on. Here I've got the ice cream and I'm going to use some cream floss to go ahead and sew around this one. I really like how the cream floss matched up with the coloring of my ice cream really well. I'm going to use brown for the chocolate fudge, and I really love this chocolate fudge. I think this looks really yummy. I was getting so hungry when I was making these ice cream cones because they looked delicious and it was making me wish I had some ice cream too. My favorite ice cream is mint chocolate chip. I don't know what everybody else likes, but chocolate and mint chocolate chip are my 2 favorite ice cream flavors. And I'm usually switching between each one on what kind of flavor I want when I have ice cream. Alright, so now that I've sewn all of my pieces together, I've got the chocolate fudge sauce turned over to the back side and I'm going to start applying some liquid glue into the center area to go ahead and start adhering all these pieces together. I'm using PPA matte adhesive. This is the adhesive I like to use. However, you can use any liquid adhesive you prefer. I also put some liquid glue on the back side of the cherry. I'm going to put that down right onto the ice cream itself. And then I'm going to pick up the chocolate fudge sauce and sandwich that cherry between the ice cream and the chocolate fudge sauce. I really love how these layer up together and create these really cute little embellishments. This is a really fun project to also do with kids. Because it's very simple stitching, the kids can really get a kick out of coloring these. They could color the papers with whatever type of medium that they want to use, and then you can help them stitch them together. You could use these ice cream cones as decorations for some sort of party. You could use them on cards like we're going to do here. You could use them as magnets. You could put magnet on the back side. So many different ideas that you could do with these. I'm going to now pop the ice cream up onto the cone using some foam tape. Just put a couple pieces on the back side and I'll remove the backing and stick that right down on top. And you can see our ice cream cone is all built and ready to go. Now I wanted to have a sentiment that matched the color of the pink in the cherry. So I'm taking my Zig Clean color marker and I'm doing some scribbles along some watercolor paper. I did some scribbles because I wanted the coloring to be a little bit variegated. I didn't want it to be a solid color. So you'll see some lighter portions and darker portions because we did that scribble and left white space in between. I really think that adds a little bit of fun and interest to the sentiment and also lends more to the watercolor feel rather than it being just a flat color. The sentiment I'm using is the Painted Enjoy die from Simon Says Stamp. I die cut not only that pink paper that we made using the Enjoy die, but I also die cut it from 3 different pieces of white cardstock. And that's because I want to layer these together to create a little bit thicker of a sentiment. It's just going to make it a little bit more sturdy on my card. So what I did was I just ran liquid adhesive all over each Enjoy die cut and then I just layered them on top of each other one by one. Now I want to work on my card base next. I wanted to have a watercolor background because we had so much watercolor going on in this card. I really wanted to continue that feel. So I'm taking an A2 size card that I created from watercolor paper. This is again the same Canson XL paper. And I'm smushing on some scattered straw distress ink. Now this is a little bit dark and I don't want it to be quite this dark, so I'm spritzing it with some water and dabbing up some of the darkest areas, and I'll keep dabbing as I'm drying. And And that's just going to help give the card a little bit more of a pastel and lighter feel because I want the ice cream cone to stand out. I'm going to add splatters to this as well. I put a bunch on, and then I'll go ahead and wait about a minute before I go ahead and dab them up with my rag. And I love the look of the splatters onto paper. You can see it adds so much texture. And it's always so fun for me to be able to watch the splatters come out into the ink. It's one of my favorite things to see. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of pink into this background as well. So I'm going to take some worn lipstick and I'll do the same smushing technique on top. This time I'm not going to put quite as much ink for the pink because I want the yellow to be more prominent. I'm going to spritz this because this again is also darker than what I want. So I'm going to spritz it with the water and dab it up with my rag and just lighten it so that way it's not as overpowering. And I love how it gets that blend of orange between the scattered straw and the worn lipstick. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm going to do that same splatter technique to create the texture onto my background. And again, I let it sit for about a minute before I dabbed it up with my rag. Alright, so now it's time to move on to finishing up this card. I'm putting some strong adhesive on the back side of my ice cream cone so that way I can adhere it down onto my card base. I'm using score tape in particular because I know this tape is very strong and I love using this for pieces that I want to stay put. So I'll go ahead and lay this down right into the center area of my card. And then I'm going to take my sentiment. I put a piece of foam tape on the back side of the Y and liquid glue on the back side of the E, N, and J. And I did this because the ice cream cone is a little bit more higher off of the cardstock than usual because of all the dimension of the stitching and the watercolor paper. It's a little thicker. So I went ahead and put that piece of foam tape on the back side of the Y so that way the sentiment would stay nice and level. I'll go ahead and press that down good and I'll apply some Spectrum Noir Clear Sparkle over top of both the cherry and the word enjoy. I just love adding a little bit of shimmer and shine on different areas of my cards whenever I can get the chance. I'm also adding sequins from Neat and Tangled onto this ice cream cone. I really think this looks so cute and creates a little fun assortment of colored sprinkles all over the card. I picked colors that matched well with the color combination on the card, and I really think this adds a nice fun and festive feel. I'm taking some Nouveau Crystal drops, and I'm covering the word enjoy as well as the cherry. I wanted to create some dimension and some shine on these pieces, so I thought the crystal drops would be a great way to go ahead and do that. So I hope you've enjoyed and got some inspiration on creating fun embellishments using the Simon Says Stamp plush dies. Remember, these dies can be used for all sorts of different things, not just felt. So I hope this has given you some ideas on how to use them in your crafting projects. And be sure to tag us on social media when you create with our Simon Says Stamp products because we would love to see what you've been up to. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below and head on over to the Simon Says Stamp blog where you can get more information on this card including still pictures and products used. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can connect with us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, as well as our blog. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.